How many of you guys have been paying attention to what Dan Lanning is building up there in Eugene, Oregon? Because to me, Oregon is slowly starting to morph into Georgia on the West Coast. And every time I've watched Oregon play the last couple of years under Dan Lanning, they've never felt like a West Coast team to me. And some of you guys understand where I'm coming from, because West Coast teams seem to be more finesse. They're small up front. But Oregon is the complete polar opposite. They have monsters on the line of scrimmage, big offensive linemen, huge defensive linemen that are freakish athletes, similar to the kind of D linemen and O linemen that Georgia recruit. And Oregon also plays with a similar physicality and aggressiveness that Georgia plays with. And it's not surprising, considering that Dan Lanning comes from the Kirby Smart coaching tree. He also has been around Nick Saban, so he knows how to build a championship level program and the areas that you need to be the strongest at, that being in the trenches. And Oregon, compared to the majority of teams in the Big Ten this year, they're not as remotely as good as what Oregon's going to be in the line of scrimmage or on the line of scrimmage. It also helps that Oregon's defense is starting to improve every year, and they're starting to reach Georgia's level of dominance defensively. Now, they still have a few ways to go until they become the behemoth that Georgia's defense has become, but they're not too far off. They got a lot of blue chippers on that defensive line. They got a lot of pass rushers that have been 5-star guys, top 100 recruits in the last couple of recruiting classes. So that defense is going to end up being elite sooner rather than later. Statistically, last year they had a top 10 defense, but I think that number was a little bit overinflated due to just how much of an advantage they had against the majority of teams that they played from a talent standpoint, because we saw this defense kind of struggle when they went up against Kalen DeBoer in Washington twice. But with how well they've been recruiting, and they've been recruiting out of this freaking world, they currently have the third best recruiting class in the nation at this moment. They had a top 10 class in 2023. And the thing that has made Oregon's recruiting so impressive is that even though they're in the West Coast and they are in Eugene, Oregon, they've been able to get guys from all over the country. Cali, Texas, Florida. Those are three of the most talent-rich states when it comes to high school recruiting. And Oregon has been killing it when it comes to getting some of the better recruiting talent out of these bigger states. And now, with you getting a limited NIL, it's going to make it even more easier for Oregon to recruit at this high as a level for the foreseeable future. And the only team in the Big Ten that has the kind of resources and NIL backing that Oregon has is Ohio State. They poured $12 million into their NIL, and that's why they had the crazy portal recruiting class that they just had. But Oregon, even though you do have a lot of NIL money, it's still hard to get people to want to go up there to Eugene, Oregon, because, listen, I ain't trying to throw no shade, and I'm not trying to hate on Eugene, Oregon. No offense to all the people that are listening to this that live up there, but I'm pretty sure it ain't shit to do up in Eugene, Oregon. And Oregon is a pretty small state. You know, it's kind of a little bit urban. There's not really a lot of things to do up there. It's not really on my high list of states that I would like to take a vacation to. Plus, it gets cold as hell up there. But for Dan Lanning to be recruiting at this high as a level, with, you know, everything that Oregon has to offer is really impressive. Just because you got access to a lot of money just doesn't guarantee that you're going to get everybody. Like, you still do have to have a campus that recruits like walking around, and if you ain't going no way to practice in class, and you still have to be able to sell recruits on the idea of, hey, if you come to Oregon, we can develop you and we can get you to the next level, which is another big reason why Oregon is slowly starting to turn more into Georgia, because Georgia is one of the best teams in the nation, not just when it comes to recruiting, but having these 5- and 4-star guys end up living up to their potential and getting those guys drafted really high in the NFL. Oregon is excellent when it comes to player production. Okay, now they haven't had too many guys recently that they've recruited that they've gotten to the league under Dan Lanning, but they've gotten a good amount of guys they've gotten from the transfer portal, like Bo Nix into the NFL. He was a first round pick. And they have the 5th highest blue chip ratio entering the 2024 college football season. 76% of their roster is comprised of 5 or 4-star talent, which means that if you're good at player development and you're really good at recruiting, eventually you're going to have a team that's good enough to win it all. And I think that Oregon is going to win a national championship sooner rather than later. Dan Lanning is kind of starting to creep into that Kirby Smart tier, or I'm not going to say that, but do you guys remember what the narrative was about Kirby Smart before he started to win national championships at Georgia? There were people that were calling him overrated, saying that he was never going to be able to get it done, and every year he didn't get it done. There were people starting to ask, if Kirby Smart doesn't win it all this year, should he get fired? We're going to start hearing those discussions creep up with Dan Lanning eventually. But for Oregon, with how high of a level they've been able to recruit, with the access to unlimited resources that they've been given from Phil Knight, not only are they going to be able to field a great roster, but they also continue to pump out a really good coaching staff. Dan Lanning's first offensive coordinator, Kenny Dillingham, was so good that despite only being an OC for 1 year, he got hired to be the head coach of Arizona State. He's one of the youngest head coaches in college football at the moment. And their current offensive coordinator, Will Stein, he's in line to get a big-time head coaching opportunity soon in the future. So Dan Lanning has showed the ability to not only be a fantastic recruiter, he also has a really good eye when it comes to building a good coaching staff. He knows how to develop talent. He knows how to get guys prepared for the next level. All you're waiting for now is for all this to translate into national championship level success, which some people, for the majority of last year, considered Oregon to be the second best team in college football. So to me, Oregon is slowly turning into the West Coast version of what Georgia is right now.